Welcome to the Sex Science Podcast, where we turn the latest peer-reviewed research on intimacy and sexuality into fun, accessible conversations. Generated by AI and fact-checked by experts, the Sex Science Podcast was created by LaShaw to empower you through knowledge. So, join us as we explore pleasure, relationships, human connection, and everything in between.
Welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're looking at how couples handle conflict and what leads to that. We worked it out feeling, when you just feel like, okay, we resolved something.
Yeah, like you can move forward.
Exactly. And to dig into this, we're going to a 2024 study by Gibson and his colleagues. It was published in the Journal of Social and Personal Relationships. Pretty cool title, too. Fighting the Good Fight. Relating warmth and dominance across romantic conflict to resolution.
I like that.
Yeah, very catchy. So this study, they looked at 173 couples. Yeah. And focused on how they communicated during these 8-minute conflict discussions.
8 minutes?
8 minutes, yeah.
That's a good chunk of time.
It's enough to get into it a little bit.
Yeah, definitely enough to get into some things. And it's interesting because they didn't just ask couples how they felt it went. They actually watched them,
Oh, really?
Yeah, they observed.
Like actually analyze their communication.
Well, like in real time.
Okay, so what did they find? What did successful conflict resolution actually look like?
Well, one of the things that really stood out was the power of warmth. Couples who felt like, hey, we resolved this, they showed way more warmth during those 8 minutes.
So, okay, how do you even measure warmth? Like, what does that actually mean?
Well, they looked at things like eye contact, genuine smiles, supportive comments, even giving compliments. Basically, are you showing care and connection even when you're disagreeing?
So it's not about avoiding conflict. It's more about how you approach it.
That's exactly it. And here's something even more interesting. It wasn't just about being warm at the start of the conversation. It was about staying warm throughout the whole 8 minutes.
So you can't just start off nice and then let things get heated.
Yeah, it seems like if that warmth cools down, it's like, throwing water on that resolution fire.
That's a great analogy.
Now, you might think, okay, well, what about dominance? Like, who's winning the argument? Does that matter? But surprisingly, they found no link between dominance and resolution.
That is surprising. You'd think the person who seems to be in control, leading the conversation or being assertive would have the upper hand.
It's a common thought for sure, but this research says it's not about winning or being right. It's about warmth and positive communication. Those seem to be the keys to helping couples feel like they've really worked through their disagreement. Really makes you think differently about how conflict works.
Definitely. So if warmth is so important, how do they actually track it during these conversations?
Okay, so they use this cool tool called the Continuous Assessment of Interpersonal Dynamics, or CAID for short. And basically, trained coders watch these 8-minute discussions.
Really watched every single one.
Yeah. And they use a joystick.
Like for video games.
I know, right? To track warmth and dominance behaviors every half second.
Wow, that's some serious data collection.
It is. They were able to capture all these little nuances, like eye contact, tone of voice, body language, all those things that contribute to the overall feel of the interaction.
It makes sense, though, because sometimes it's not just what you say, it's how you say it.
Exactly. So for the couples who felt like, yeah, we resolved this conflict, what were some of the specific warmth behaviors the coders were seeing?
Yeah, I'm curious, too.
Well, as we said, eye contact and smiling were big ones, but it went beyond that. They also saw things like validating comments, like, I understand where you're coming from, or expressions of support, even just little hand squeeze, physical affection.
So it's like even in the middle of a disagreement, those little gestures can really say, hey, we're a team here.
That's it. It's about staying connected. Now, on the flip side, couples who showed declining warmth were more likely to, turn away, roll their eyes, make sarcastic comments, or interrupt each other.
Yeah, that'll definitely shut down the warmth pretty quickly.
And here's the thing. This pattern held true no matter what they were arguing about. Whether it was finances, family time spent together, it was the warmth or lack of warmth that seemed to be the biggest factor in whether they felt like they'd resolved it.
So you could be arguing about something totally mundane, like whose turn it is to empty the dishwasher. But if you're doing it with warmth and respect, you're more likely to come out of it feeling like, okay, at least we understand each other.
Right. It highlights that conflict is kind of inevitable in relationships.
Oh, yeah. You're not going to agree on everything all the time.
The key is having the tools to handle those disagreements effectively.
Right. So we've talked about warmth, but you mentioned earlier that dominance didn't seem to play a big role in resolution. Can you talk about that a little more?
Yeah, that was a surprising finding, for sure. We often think about conflict in terms of winners and losers, but this research suggests that's not really helpful.
Yeah, you'd think the person who's leading the conversation or being more assertive would be more likely to feel like they got what they wanted.
It seems logical, right? But the research says no. Whether someone was more assertive or took the lead didn't really predict whether they felt the conflict was resolved.
So even if you win the argument, you might not actually feel better about the outcome.
Exactly. It really challenges this idea that you need to win to feel good.
It makes me wonder if trying to dominate the conversation could actually backfire.
How so?
Well, if you're so focused on being in control, maybe you're not really listening to your partner.
I see what you're saying.
Maybe you're missing out on understanding their perspective.
That's a really interesting point, and it's something researchers are looking into. It's possible that when you're too focused on dominance, you create an imbalance that makes it harder to find common ground. And that's where warmth comes in.
Yeah, because if you approach the conversation with warmth and a genuine desire to understand your partner, it creates a space for more open communication.
Right. You're basically saying, hey, your perspective matters to me even if I don't agree with it. And that can go a long way in helping both of you feel heard and validated.
This is so fascinating because it really changes the way we think about conflict. It's not about winning, it's about connection.
Exactly. And it highlights how these seemingly small choices we make and how we talk to our partners, especially during disagreements, really do have a huge impact on the relationship as a whole.
Absolutely. So we've talked about the importance of warmth, but I'm curious, what about the other side of the coin? What are some of the behaviors that really kill the warmth and make it almost impossible to resolve a conflict?
Okay, well, the researchers observed a few things that seemed to really shut down the warmth and make resolution way harder. One was defensiveness.
Defensiveness. Yeah, it's like a classic relationship trap, isn't it?
It is. And it can look like so many different things, from flat-out denial to, more subtle blame shifting.
Yeah, it's like our instinct is to protect ourselves, even if it means shutting down communication.
Exactly. And the problem is when one person gets defensive, it often makes the other person defensive too.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Another thing the researchers noticed was criticism.
That makes sense. Criticism tends to make people feel attacked and then they get defensive.
It's not quite the same as, expressing a need or voicing a complaint. Criticism often feels very personal and sweeping, like you're attacking your partner's whole character instead of addressing the actual issue.
So it's important to think about how we're bringing up our concerns.
Right. Focus on the specific issue, not on judging your partner or labeling them. And then, of course, there's contempt, which is like the most damaging behavior in relationships.
Oh, yeah, contempt. That's the big one, right?
Yes. John Gottman, the relationship researcher, he actually considers contempt to be one of the biggest predictors of divorce.
Wow. So what does contempt actually look like?
It's any behavior that basically communicates disgust or disrespect for your partner, sarcasm, eye-rolling, mocking, name-calling, anything that says, I'm better than you.
Ouch. Yeah, that's definitely not going to create a warm and loving environment.
No, not at all. And we might not always intend to be contemptuous, but it can slip out, especially when we're angry or frustrated.
So it's about paying attention to what we're saying and doing, even when our emotions are running high.
Exactly. If you notice yourself slipping into contempt, the best thing to do is take a step back, calm down, and then try to approach the conversation again in a more respectful way.
This has been so helpful. I'm already thinking about how I can apply all of this to my own relationships.
Me too. And remember, it's not about being perfect. We all mess up sometimes. The important thing is to be aware of these patterns and then make a conscious effort to choose warmth even when it's tough.
Yeah, it's about remembering that our partners aren't the enemy. And even when we disagree, we can still choose to connect, to listen, and to try to understand each other's point of view.
That's a great way to put it. So for everyone listening, think about this. If you're noticing these warmth killers in your own relationship, what's one little step you could take today to change things, to move towards more understanding?
That's a great question. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive. Thanks for joining us for this exploration of warmth and conflict resolution. We hope you found it insightful.
Thank you for listening to the Sex Science Podcast brought to you by LaShaw. We hope that you learned something new about the wonderful world of human intimacy and sexuality, and join us next time as we dive into more fascinating research. And remember, science is for you. Music for this podcast was produced by SOUNDRAW.